obstacle in the way of the gospel of Christ. Do you not know that those who are employed in the temple service get their food from the temple, and those who serve at the altar share in what is sacrificed on the altar? In the same way, the Lord commanded that those who proclaim the gospel should get their living by the gospel. But I have made no use of any of these rights, nor am I writing this so that they may be applied in my case. Indeed, I would rather die than that. No one will deprive me of my ground for boasting. If I proclaim the gospel, this gives me no ground for boasting, for an obligation is laid on me, and woe to me if I do not proclaim the gospel. For if I do this of my own will, I have a reward. But if not of my own will, I am entrusted with a commission. What then is my reward? Just this, that in my proclamation, I may make the gospel free of charge, so as not to make full use of my rights in the gospel. For though I am free with respect to all, I have made myself a slave to all, so that I might win more of them. To the Jews, I became as a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law, I became as one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law, I became as one outside the law, though
We lost her.
but only one receives the prize. Run in such a way that you may win it. Athletes exercise self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wealth, but we an imperishable one. So I do not run aimlessly, nor do I box as though beating the air, but I punish my body and enslave it, so that after proclaiming to others, I myself should not be disqualified. And there you have a wonderful discourse from Paul, and you finish it and you kind of go, huh? This is one of those great Pauline passages where you're just kind of going, what in the world is he talking about? And actually, there is a wonderful, I'm getting a note here that my internet is unstable. So if you go away or if I freeze up, it'll come back. But we've been having this trouble this week. So, but if you have the Lutheran Study Bible, across from the chapter 9's beginning, there is a "Am I not free" kind of thing, and I just going to read it to you because I think this is what he should have said. Paul continues to speak of what it means to exercise Christian freedom, but the conversation takes a personal turn. He believes it is within his rights to freely ask for compensation for his work as an apostle, but he has not chosen to exercise that right. Part of his problem in Corinth was apparently that some in the church had very specific expectations of how an apostle should live, based perhaps on the example of other apostles or even on the words of Jesus. They expected Paul to depend on them financially. Perhaps some of them even wanted to own his ministry. He insisted on his right to be financially independent. And so or Lyra or whatever, we get these, it's always about that, people who give a lot of money to the church want to be able to run the church or the organization or whatever. So I just wanted to ask you, I have a couple of comments about this just within this rant that he's doing, but the point being, he says, I basically have become all things to all people. If you're this way, I'm going to be like you so that I can convince you that the gospel is for you as well. And he wants this. I think the crux of this is in verse 18, when he asks, what then is my reward? I have the right to ask for compensation, but I haven't asked for compensation. So what is my reward that is, that I should expect? And he says, just this, that in my proclamation, I may make the gospel free of charge so as not to make full use of my rights in the gospel. Okay. And then he goes into this thing about, freedom and slavery and, and there's another footnote I'll go to in a minute, but I think it would be an interesting question, and we don't really have to discuss this, but it would be good to think about, especially now as we have a transition in leadership. What can we expect from our leaders in the church? What expectations do we have about our ministers that have nothing to do with their ministry? I could give you a list. I could give you a list of things that I did this morning, that were like, I don't think this is in my letter of call, but so, this is a good time to be thinking about that for all the leaders of the church, not just the ordained leaders, but, what do we expect from our leaders? Is it that they do what we want them to do? Or is it, that we really want them to be who God wants them to be, and that is one of the things that I just absolutely love about Pastor Anthony. Not only is he a very smart man, but he listens to God, and I say, if I were going to write a stump speech for him, the first thing I would say is, this is my colleague and this man listens to God, so that's, I think that would be one of the first things, is that the leaders are the people who are called into that position to help you hear the voice of God in the community. And oftentimes that voice of God is not exactly what you might wish to hear. So any other thoughts on that, if you want, either on the text or on that query that's in I love that they put these little things in here.
I think that
Paul his ministry supported. I mean, obviously he needed to have clothing and shelter and food, and,
Right.
Stuff like that.
Peggy's
Somebody had
asking
to do it.
how did Paul support his ministry? Didn't we talk about this a couple of weeks ago? I think you might not have been here,
Okay.
but he was a tent maker,
Okay.
and he and Barnabas, wherever they went, they set up shop.
Okay.
So he was what
So he did work.
right.
That is
And
good.
we would call it, like today, if a pastor is a bivocational pastor and does like a halftime pastorate and then works someplace else, we call it a tent maker ministry,
Okay.
so that
Yeah,
they're
I
working
do
at a
understand
trade,
that.
and, and that also is then, how they support themselves. And I'm sure there probably also were people who supplied him if he needed something, they'd give him food, or they'd give him new shoes, or, kind of a barter kind of system. I think that was very part of the hospitality of the Middle East. But I mean, as far as actually being paid with coinage, or, I don't think, other than the tent maker, what he earned that way, I don't know that they gave him money. He said he would refuse it, because that then ties his hands. And then the gospel isn't free, because you're paying the gospel speaker to speak it, and okay. So the gospel is a gracious gift of God. And that's the point that Paul's trying to make. So
What is it?
Yeah.
Cool.
I was just
go.
gonna say that when talking about leaders, that you said Pastor Anthony listens to God.
Wait, back up. Start again, Melva.
When you talk about leaders, you said Pastor Anthony listens to God. I think also God talks to him.
Did you hear that?
Yes. I don't know.
Did you hear?
I heard, the last thing I heard was Pastor Anthony listens to God.
Yeah.
And also God talks to Anthony.
I lost her again.
Oh,
Uh-uh.
God talks to Anthony.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Lloyd, I'm gonna go out and come back in.
Turn it
You hear
off
me?
back in.
She is.
Everybody's frozen.
She wants you to.